They called her cursed. They whispered that her scar was a mark of evil spirits. They turned their backs when she walked by and covered their children's eyes as if ugliness were contagious. But the girl with the scar knew something the villagers had forgotten, that destiny is not written on your face, but forged in your heart. In the village of Asaba, there lived a girl named Adiz. Her name meant daughter of the king, though she was no princess. Her mother had given her that name with hope, believing that every child carries royalty within them. But the villagers saw no royalty in Adiz. From her left eyebrow down to her chin ran a scar, thick and dark, like a river carved into her skin. She had gotten it as a baby when a cooking fire tipped over, the flames leaving their mark before her mother could pull her free. As Adiz grew, so did the cruelty around her. Children pointed and laughed. Scarface, monster, hide your cursed mark. Women at the market would lean away when she passed, whispering prayers of protection as if her appearance could bring misfortune. Even the young men who came of age with her looked through her as if she were invisible, their eyes sliding past to find prettier faces, unblemished skin, features that fit their narrow idea of beauty. Adiz's mother held her on the nights she cried. Your scar does not define you, my daughter. It is just skin. What matters is the heart beneath it. But it was hard to believe that when the whole world seemed to judge her by what they saw, not who she was. Despite the mockery, Adiz refused to hide. She could have worn a veil. Many suggested it. Cover your face, the elder women advised, meaning well. Make it easier for people to see past it. But Adiz thought, why should I hide to make others comfortable? Why should I apologize for a mark I did not choose? So she walked through the village with her head high, the scar visible for all to see. She worked harder than anyone, tending her mother's garden until it bloomed with vegetables that fed half the village. She had gentle hands that could soothe crying babies and a voice that could calm frightened animals. She knew every herb that grew in the forest and could brew remedies that eased pain and fever. She gave freely of her knowledge and her kindness. When Mama Ifeoma's goat got sick, Adiz nursed it back to health without asking for payment. When little Chidi fell from a tree and broke his arm, Adiz set the bone with such skill that he healed without even a crooked bend. But still, the villagers took her help and gave nothing back but whispers and sideways glances. She's useful, they would say, but cursed is cursed. No man will marry her. No family will claim her as their own. Adiz heard it all. Every word, every whisper, every cruel laugh, and each one carved a different kind of scar, the kind that doesn't show on skin but settles deep in the spirit. There were days she wanted to give up, to stop being kind to people who would never be kind in return, to let bitterness take root and harden her heart until she became as cruel as they were. But something in her refused, something stubborn and bright that whispered, they are wrong about you, and one day, the truth will be impossible to ignore. The turning point came on the day the oracle arrived in Asaba. She was an old woman, bent with age but sharp-eyed, who traveled from village to village reading futures in the patterns of thrown bones and the flight of birds. The villagers gathered in the square, eager for glimpses of their destinies. The oracle sat beneath the great tree, and one by one, people came to her with their questions and their coins. Will my crops flourish? Will my son return from the trading journey? Will I find love this year? She answered some, refused others, and occasionally she would look up at someone in the crowd and speak without being asked, as if destiny itself demanded to be voiced. When her eyes found Adiz standing at the edge of the gathering, the old woman's entire body went still. You, girl with the mark, come here. The crowd fell silent. Adiz felt every eye turned to her, but she stepped forward, her spine straight, her scar catching the afternoon light. The oracle studied her face for a long moment, then smiled, not with pity, not with disgust, but with recognition, as if seeing an old friend after years apart. They mock you, don't they? Call you cursed, unlucky, unmarriageable. Adiz said nothing, but her jaw tightened. Fools, the oracle said, loud enough for everyone to hear. They look at your face and see a flaw, but I look at your face and see destiny. That scar is not a curse. It is a mark, a sign. You were chosen before you were born, marked by fire so that when the time comes, you will be recognized. Recognized by whom? Adis whispered, by the one who needs you most, by the kingdom that will fall without you, by the future that cannot exist unless you step forward when others step back. The oracle reached out and touched the scar gently, reverently. This mark will save lives, child. Remember that when the time comes, your scar is not your shame, it is your destiny. Then she turned to the crowd, her voice sharp as a blade. And you, all of you who whispered and judged and turned away, remember this day. Remember that you scorned the very person who will stand between you and ruin. Pray that she is more merciful than you have been. 3 months later, the prophecy began to unfold. A sickness came to Asaba. It started with fever and chills, then spread to weakness so profound that people could not rise from their sleeping mats. It moved through the village like wildfire, claiming the young and old, the strong and weak, without discrimination. The village healer tried every remedy she knew, but nothing worked. The fever only spread. Within 2 weeks, half the village was sick. Within 3, people began to die. Desperation settled over Asaba like a burial shroud. Then, one evening, a stranger arrived. He was a healer from the kingdom beyond the great river, a man renowned throughout the lands for his knowledge of rare diseases and mysterious ailments. The village chief had sent messengers begging for his help, offering payment of gold and cattle. The healer examined the sick and took samples of the herbs the village healer had tried. Then he shook his head gravely. This is strange sickness, rare and deadly. I have seen it only twice before in my life. There is a cure, but it requires a very specific medicine made from the bark of the iron tree that grows deep in the forbidden forest, combined with water from the spirit spring and ground leaves of the night blooming flower. We will send our strongest men, the chief said immediately. It's not about strength, the healer interrupted. The journey is dangerous, yes, but the real challenge is that the cure can only be prepared by someone with the mark. What mark? An old text describes it. A burned scar, running from brow to chin on the left side. The person bearing this mark has hands blessed by the fire spirits. Only they can prepare the medicine correctly. Without them, the ingredients are just plants and water. With them, it becomes a cure. Do you have anyone in this village who bears such a mark? Silence fell over the gathered crowd. Then, slowly, every head turned toward Adis. She stood at the back of the gathering, having come to listen, to help where she could. Now, she found herself the center of attention once more, but this time, the looks were different. Not mocking, not disgusted, afraid, desperate, pleading. The chief, who had never spoken directly to her before, stepped forward. Adis, we need you. Adis looked at the faces around her. These were the people who had mocked her, who had called her cursed, who had treated her as less than human for something she could not control. She could refuse. She could let them suffer as she had suffered. She could watch them beg the way she had silently begged for acceptance year after year. The bitter part of her wanted them to know how it felt to be rejected, to be judged, to be left alone in desperate need. But then she looked closer, really looked. She saw Mama Ifioma, the woman whose goat she had healed, now sick herself, her breathing labored and weak. She saw little Chidi, the boy whose arm she had mended, now feverish and small on his mother's lap. I'll go, she said quietly. The relief that washed over the crowd was palpable. The chief actually wept. Thank you, thank you. We will give you whatever you need, pay you whatever you ask. I don't want payment. I want a promise, anything. When this is over, you will teach your children that scars do not make monsters. That difference is not curse. That the people you dismiss today might be the ones you need tomorrow. Promise me you will be better. The chief nodded, shame evident on his face. We promise. Adis, the renowned healer from the kingdom, and 3 of the village's strongest young men set out into the forbidden forest at dawn. The journey was everything the healer had warned. The forest was dark and tangled, full of creatures that watched from the shadows. The iron tree grew on a cliff edge that required careful climbing. The spirit spring was guarded by trials that tested their courage and purity of heart. But Adise moved through it all with a quiet determination. Her hands, marked by fire, seemed to know instinctively which plants to choose, which path to take, which words to speak to the spirits of the spring. On the third day, they returned to Asaba with everything needed for the cure. Prepared the medicine exactly as the ancient texts described, her scarred hands moving with a grace that seemed almost holy. The healer watched in amazement as she ground and mixed and blessed, her scars seeming to glow faintly in the firelight. When the medicine was ready, they began treating the sick. The village was one by one. The fever broke. The celebration that followed was unlike anything Asaba had seen. Within a week, but Adise noticed something more important to destroy Asaba was gone. She noticed how people looked at her only Adise could not create. With pity, not with disgust, but with respect, with gratitude. With the dawning realization that they had been cruel to someone extraordinary, children no longer pointed. They waved. Women at the market no longer leaned away. They sought her counsel. The young men no longer looked through her. They saw her, truly saw her, and some began to understand that beauty is not just what the eyes perceive, but what the heart recognizes. The chief made a proclamation. From that day forward, Adise would be honored as the village's guardian healer. Her scar was no longer spoken of as a curse, but as a mark of blessing, a sign that she had been chosen for a special purpose. But the greatest change was not in how others saw her. It was in how Adise saw herself. She had always known her worth, but now, the world knew it too. And in that knowing, she found a peace that had nothing to do with acceptance and everything to do with truth. Her scar had not changed, but everything else had. Years later, when Adise was old and respected throughout many villages, young people would come to her asking for wisdom. One girl, born with a twisted foot that made her limp, asked through tears, "How do you bear it? Being different? Being marked?" Adise touched her scar, that old familiar ridge of skin that had been both burden and blessing. "I bear it by understanding that what makes me different is also what makes me necessary. The world tries to tell us that we must fit a certain shape, look a certain way, be a certain thing. But destiny doesn't work that way. Sometimes the very thing that sets you apart is the thing that allows you to change the world. But what if people never see that? What if they only see the flaw? Then you see it for them. You know your worth even when they don't. You be kind even when they are cruel. You rise even when they try to make you small. Because one day, the truth becomes impossible to ignore. And when that day comes, you want to be someone you're proud of, not someone who became as small as their judgment. The scars we carry, whether on our skin or in our spirits, do not define our worth. The world will judge us for things we cannot control, will mock us for being different, will try to make us feel less than we are. But true strength lies not in fitting their narrow standards, but in knowing our own value regardless of their opinion. Adise could have let cruelty make her cruel, could have let rejection make her bitter, could have hidden her scar and dimmed her light to make others comfortable. But she chose differently. She chose kindness over revenge. She chose purpose over approval. She chose to be exactly who she was, scar and all, until the day came when her difference became her destiny. Remember this. What the world calls a flaw might be the very thing that makes you extraordinary. Do not hide your marks. Do not apologize for being different. Stand tall, serve with purpose, and trust that your destiny is not determined by those who judge you, but by the heart you carry within. Moral lesson: our differences are not flaws to hide but gifts that make us unique. True worth comes from character, not appearance. Respond to cruelty with kindness, to rejection with resilience, and to judgment with unshakable knowledge of your own value. What others see as weakness may be the very strength destiny requires. Like, comment, subscribe, or thanks for watching.